In our culture, your business and your boss are just like your parents. And if you're leaving your position, it's telling them that they didn't do a good job as parents.
Welcome to Your Intended Message, the perfect place for leaders and promising professionals who want to convey the intended message for greater success. Every week, we interview experts who address the challenges and best practices to deliver your message effectively. That might be one-to-one, one-to-few, or one-to-many. And perhaps the most important conversation, one-to-self. I'm your host, George Torok. My guest today is Mitch Weisburgh. Here's 3 facts that I think you should know about Mitch. 1, in the 1980s and 90s, Mitch started and ran a company that trained hundreds of thousands of people how to use computers. And that company grew to over 130 employees. 2, Mitch started working with mind shifting in 2017 when he developed a 2-day workshop for undergraduates to learn how to be resourceful, resilient, and collaborative. And he received standing ovations each time he taught that course. And 3, Mitch and his wife have had over a dozen exchange students from all over the world who lived with them while attending a year of high school and still sees and talks to practically all of them. What a wonderful experience for those students. Mitch Weisburgh, welcome to Your Intended Message.
George, thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to talking with you.
Delighted to be working with you. And I'm curious about hosting those foreign students in your home for a year. I imagine that gave you wonderful insight into how people from other cultures, other countries, other languages perhaps, how they think and how they communicate. Was that helpful to you?
So the whole thing was such a rewarding experience. And to see these kids, many of whom are now adults, embarking on their careers has been fantastic, and maintaining friendships with them. I think, one of our first exchange student was from Thailand. And in the Thai culture, you never make another person mad. You never make another person wrong. And so having a person live with us who did everything possible to make us feel that whatever we were saying was right. Do you like this? Yes. What do you want for dinner? What would you like for dinner? And living with that at the same time as our son, who's now a lawyer, he would argue with the stop sign. So here's a person who is looking for an excuse to have a debate with somebody. In the morning, they would, Win would say to our son, good morning. And our son would say, what's so good about it? And Win would say, well, some people will say it's good. How are you finding it? And Herbie would say, make up your mind. It's either a good morning or a bad morning. Which is it? And the day would proceed from there. And after about, a month or two, they kind of knew each other, or they did know each other, but they continued that joke then for the entire rest of the time that Win was with us. And the experiences with people from Latin America, from people from Asia, China, Europe, South America. I mean, it's, to be able to live with people of different cultures, and you don't initially know, is it because they're different people? Is it because they're from different families? Is it because they're teenagers? Or is it because the culture is different? And so you're always kind of assessing, like, is my message getting through the way I want it? Am I receiving their message the way they want it? And being able to adjust.
What a wonderful learning lab that must have been. I applaud you for being so bold and generous with your time and your household. Wow.
And now we have a Brazilian tennis pro living with us for the summer. So it continues.
That's fabulous.
My wife forbid me to have any more exchange students. So technically he's not an exchange student, right?
And sometimes, Mitch, when it comes to understanding how we communicate, it helps when we encounter or try to communicate with someone who has a completely different way of looking at the world, as your son and this student from Thailand did. And the for the two of them, that must have been wonderfully memorable and enlightening.
Yes. And so just a different story. This is with our Chinese daughter, who actually is living in the U.S. right now. But she was back in the U.S. She'd already graduated high school and was in college when our son graduated college. And she came with us to his graduation, and we're in the car. And I said, so Herbie, now that you're done with college, what do you think you're going to do? He says, I think I'll be really good in international business. And from the back seat, our Eva, our Chinese exchange student daughter, says, well, what makes you think you'll be good in international business? He says, well, I've lived in different countries. I've attended schools in different countries. I've studied, and I've always been interested in business. And I think that I would be really helpful in international business. So then she says, well, okay, then let me ask you a question. Let's say that you're in China and you're working and you find a better job and you decide to leave your job. What do you tell your boss? So just, if you think about it for a minute, okay. And then he says, well, okay, I would go to my boss and I would say, I want to thank you for everything you've done for me. I will always remember this as my start in business. You've taught me a lot. I will always owe you, and I'll think very highly of you. But I have a better offer that I decided to take, and I'll be leaving. And, do you need 2 weeks notice, or do you need more than 2 weeks? I'd like to leave on good terms. And then I said, well, so Eva, what would you tell your boss? She said, I would say, I'm sorry, my mother is very sick and I have to leave and I have to take care of her. And my son says, but that's a lie. And Eva says, but what you said was a lie also. You won't always remember this. Your boss didn't help you. She didn't really pave the way. You were just repeating the lies of your culture. In our culture, your business and your boss are just like your parents. And if you're leaving your position, it's telling them that they didn't do a good job as parents. And so if you have a sickness and you have to take care of your mother or something, that's perfectly understandable. But if you're leaving for a better job, that's an insult. And Herbie says, but they know you're lying. And Eva says, but your ex-boss knows that you were lying when you were telling it to her also. If you're going to work in another country, you have to understand the lies that everyone in that country follows. It's just like one of my favorite stories about Eva.
That is a fabulous insight. Understand the lies that other people are following. And we probably don't like to admit that we live by lies, but we do.
We do.
We might get upset, but you're lying. Well, of course, and you are too.
Right.
Well, that's what everybody else does. Yeah, and you're all lying, the whole group of you.
Well, I think Yuval Noah, he said, I think this was him that said that, a culture succeeds when everybody follows the same lies.
Insightful.
Yeah.
Good. Yes. Mm-hmm. And Mitch, what is mind shifting about? Who needs it, and how will it save them?
So mind shifting is about really three different things. It's about resourcefulness, resilience, and collaboration. And the way I think of resourcefulness is the ability to tap into those resourceful areas of your brain, the ability to think creatively, think critically, executive function, to be able to connect and have empathy for people. Those are all functions of your resourceful brain. And what very often happens is we get locked into a survival mode, which is the more primitive parts of the brain, where everything becomes binary. Things are either good or they're bad, and we're judging them. And we get locked into doing things without thinking about them. And to give people the skills where they can realize, oh my gosh, I'm just doing this because I've always done this, not because this is necessarily the right thing to do, or I'm just doing this because I'm angry, not because it's helping me accomplish my goals. Give people the skills so that they can recognize when they're in what I call limbic, the limbic parts of the brain, or survival mode, to be able to quiet those parts of the brain and then tap into their resourceful parts of the brain is resourcefulness. And then resilience really builds on that. And it's to be able to tap into the resources that you need in order to accomplish the things that you most want to accomplish, despite whatever events are happening. And that really stems from our natural way of looking at situations and thinking, okay, here's the problem. There's one solution that's going to be best. I'm either going to find it, or I'll find a way of finding it, or I know it. Anybody with another solution is wrong. So I just have to convince them that they're wrong. And as soon as I do this, that's going to solve the problem and I can move on. And every single part of that doesn't work for most things. I mean, sure, there are clearly simple things like, if I'm thirsty and there's a glass of water next to me, reaching for the glass of water and taking a sip is, that's the one right answer. But for many things, there are more than one right answer, and you need expertise and you need more information in order to come up with one of those right answers. And what's less important is the thing that you do. What's more important is that everybody's on board with the thing that you do. And if you approached issues from the standpoint that there are likely going to be multiple ways of doing things, the whole tenure of meetings changes from we should do this versus we should do this to let's just look at the trade-offs, and it doesn't really matter which one we do, but everybody let's be on board with one of these. And then there are situations where nobody knows the right answer. And I think COVID was a prime demonstration of where we mistook a situation as there will be a right answer for a situation where nobody knew what was going to happen. We didn't know how COVID spread. We didn't know how serious it was. And yet we relied on these experts who didn't want to appear wrong, and they wanted to appear in authority. So they made it look like it was a simple, urgent issue, and we just had to follow what they said. Whereas when you're dealing with those types of issues, the way you need to deal with them is by experimenting, trying different things so that you can get the information from that and choose what to do next. And so this whole demeanor of looking at situations and I'm going to do this, oh, it failed, and then try to find blame, changes from I'm going to do this, I'm going to take a look at the results, and then I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do next. And so that the way of dealing with complex issues is very different from simple versus complicated. And then there are actual times where there's an emergency where the number one thing is to get to safety. That your house is burning. You need to get out of the house. You can't worry about, gee, I wonder how I should rewire the house so it doesn't catch fire next time. Okay. So that you can deal with that after you're all safe. But number one is safety. And then we have people who are in leadership positions. In order to get their will across, what they're constantly doing is they're preying on our fears and making us believe that situations are urgent so that we lose our ability to be resourceful and all we do is follow them. And so understanding those different types of situations and different ways to react and different ways to prepare is what I call resilience. And then the collaboration part of it is, predicated on the fact that whatever we're going to be doing and however noble our intentions, there are going to be people who disagree with us. There are going to be people who get in our way. There are going to be people who try to compete with us, who try to harm us. There's going to be people that we don't like. And our natural mechanisms for dealing with that, most of them don't work. Some of them work short term. Some of them actually make the situation worse. But there's 50, 60 years worth of research on what really works. And it's a lot of them are based on rapport, but a lot of them are based on flexibility. And so understanding why what we're doing in dealing with conflicts doesn't work, and how to recognize those situations, understanding then the 5 different styles of dealing with conflict, understanding how to fit the tools with the correct style, and then understanding how you develop a mindset that's open as you're using these different styles and as you're deploying the different tools, allows you to collaborate in order to accomplish goals that basically everybody engages in and motivates everybody involved. So it's, resourcefulness, resilience, and collaboration of the three parts.
Mitch, that sounds like, and when you say it, it sounds like a logical progression, a logical way to work. However, I'm guessing that it gets sabotaged. What gets in the way? What are the obstacles people need to get by?
So there's different obstacles at each level, okay? The obstacles at the resourceful level is that in our own brains, our survival brains basically come to decisions in like hundredths of a second. They wake up in 2/100ths of a second. They cycle through different things, and the decisions of what we're going to do or what we're going to say, those decisions actually get made in our emotional centers. Like, this is good, this is bad. Okay. Well, our resourceful parts of our brain tend to wake up in 2 to 3 seconds. So very often, without even thinking about it, subconsciously or unconsciously, we've come up with what we're going to do. And once we've come up with what we're going to do, our resourceful parts of the brain, their main job is to defend what we've already decided. And so they come up with rationalization. So most of the time, when you ask a person like, well, why did you go to this college? Why did you take this job? They'll come up with a rationalization. But the reason really is that somehow or other, in 99% of the cases, their survival system came up with, oh, I could attend this college. Then their emotional parts of the survival brain said, yes, let's do that. And then what kicked in was the prefrontal cortex later on and said, okay, so here's the reasons why you came up with that. And that's what we give. So from the standpoint of being resourceful, it's the ability of our limbic brain to sabotage the things that we really want by coming up with different actions and trying to keep us safe, because the number one thing that the survival brain wants us to do is to survive. So every time you try something new, you're kind of risking something. So if it can get you to stop trying new things, it can, quote, keep you safe, quote, even though technically that ends up not being so safe. And so we all have this part X is a common term for it. Part X that basically makes us miserable by telling us that we can't be doing new things. Let's say you're in a group and you're thinking, you have a job and you're thinking, well, gee, do I stick it out? I'm not really happy. Do I leave? Do I talk to my boss? And so let's say you have those 3 choices. Part X, when you say, well, I'm going to stick it out, part X will say, yeah, that's why you're never going to you're never going to advance, because you're never willing to do anything. You just stick with what you're doing. And this means that all these things that you think that you want, you're never going to have. And then if you were to think, well, gee, something, I'm going to talk with my boss. And they're like, yeah, right, that's going to work. Every time you talk to the boss, you get angry, your boss gets angry. This is just going to be one of those. You might even get fired for talking to your boss. Yeah, something, you just stay in your hole, stay with the job, and realize that you're never going to amount to anything. And then if you choose like, well, something, I'm going to start looking for a job, that part X, and even though you only have these 3 choices, right? The part X is going to say, oh yeah, that's right. You never stick with anything. You're always moving on to the next great thing. Just if you stuck with this a little bit longer, things would probably work out. But no, just like you always do, you move on to the next thing, you leave things undone, and that's why you'll never amount to anything. So we all have that part X, and that's, a big part of our survival brain, our limbic system. And basically, when we learn to laugh at that part X, it gives us back the power. It's like, oh, that's my part X trying to make me miserable again. Thank you for warning me that this is a danger, but something, I don't have to listen to you. And, learning how to do that allows you to move on.
That part X, I'm guessing, is part of why some people feel that imposter syndrome.
Exactly. George, you hit it exactly right.
So it's criticizing because your parents or your teachers aren't around anymore. So your brain is doing it to you.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly what happens. I can't do this. I'm not good enough. All those are coming from that part X.
Okay, Mitch. So it's a mess inside my head. And you've just pointed that out. so what?
Not your head, because you're from Canada. You're okay.
We like to think so. So what can one do? Is there a pattern? Is there a mantra? Is there a set of questions? How do we get the conflict in our brain to work together?
Well, so, I wrote a book on that. I teach a course primarily for educators, because my goal is to reach the educators who can then reach the kids and train that next generation how to think that way. But, in the book and in the course, there's like 30, 40 different things. But a lot of it is what I call the self-commander, which is, first of all, the ability to recognize when we're in that mind frame. And sometimes that's enough. Okay. Right. So you realize like, oh my gosh, I'm in limbic mode. I don't have to be in limbic mode. And that might be enough to get you back into resourceful mode. And then the second thing is positive self-talk. And positive self-talk is not just like, you can do this, go ahead. That kind of causes the survival brain to fight back against it. It's really more like talk that opens yourself up. Like, perhaps I can, like, I wonder what else I could do. I wonder what other alternatives there are. Gee, have I ever faced obstacles before and overcome them? Is this just like those other cases? So positive internal dialogue is a second way. And then a third way is distraction, because distraction takes your mind off what's happening. And distraction could be meditation, or it could be mindfulness. It could be taking a walk, or even better, taking a walk in nature. It could be music. It could be art. It could be working out. But something that that kind of calms down that survival brain, and then allows you to, once it's calmed down, to then access your resourceful parts. And sometimes in the short run, you can't do it yourself. And so there have been times where I've just been so upset about something, or so stuck in something, that I've had to reach out to somebody else. Like, I'll call my son. He's an adult, and it's like, so Herbie, I'm just absolutely stuck. And he always begins the same way. It's like, Dad, you wrote the book on this. Like, you should know what to do. It's like, yeah, I know that, but I can't do it for myself. He says, okay, I'm just going to go to the book. I'm going to, walk through a couple of the techniques on the book with you. And, having somebody do that with me, that's enough. That can, distract my limbic brain, get me thinking about what I should be doing or what I want to do, and allow me to get back on track. So those are really the four ways. 1 is being aware. 2 is positive self-talk. 3 is distraction. And 4 is reaching out somebody who can help you get back on track.
Now, a technique that I use when I'm confused, when I'm dealing with an issue and there's too many thoughts going through my head that I can't get them straight, I go and I write on a flip chart. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I write a phrase. Sometimes it's just a list of words, just ideas. Here's things that I think are important. Here's what could be influent. Here's my choices. Here's what I'm afraid of. And then I step back and I look at it, and I'm able to process that, put things in place.
Mm-hmm. So that is very powerful. And, I think of like just the name of your podcast is Your Intended Message. Okay. And what you're going back to is the intended part of that. So you're coming back to one of the 5 powers of the resourceful mind, which is, what is the overriding goal? And I call that, or I borrowed it from a person named Shirzad Chamine, but I call that your navigate power. It's to go back to what's really important. So what is it that you really intend? And once you're using one of those 5 powers of your resourceful or your sage brain, you're in resourceful mode. And that then causes you to think about, well, this is what I want. Now, how do I go about doing that? And that's a very powerful technique.
And Mitch, you've teased us with these 5 powers. Can you quickly list them so that we get an understanding?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Okay. So, right. So I said there's 5 powers. And so one of the powers is empathy, connecting with others. And so when you're thinking, I'm dealing with this other person, and all I want to do for right now is connect and understand that person, then all the things about competitive, trying to be tied to outcomes, that puts you in a sage frame of mind. A second one is exploration. Okay. Just looking at information, not for the purpose of saying, I gotta find out how I'm going to do this, but let me just find out some more information. I'm really curious. Okay. So exploration is the second power. A third power is innovation. And it's not, a lot of people, it's like, oh yeah, we're going to innovate. I have this idea and I just need to get everybody to do it. Innovation is generating new ideas, not just with yourself, but building on the ideas of other people also. So when you're in the mind frame of, we're just going to come up with new ideas and we're not going to throw anything out. Disney called it kind of the dreamer stage. He had this dreamer realist critic methodology, but in the stage where you're connecting with other people and yourself just to come up with new ideas. That's the innovation power. And the third is focused action. And in focused action, you're taking action not because you're tied to that action winning, but because you're tied to that action being the first next step that you're taking, so that you can get information. And just like a Jedi warrior, like, okay, I tried to parry this, it didn't work, but I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and you're just like you just reacting to the information. You're in like a state of flow. What Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi from University of Chicago or Northwestern, sorry, now I can't remember, but what he used to call is the sense of flow, where you lose track of time and you're so focused on your acting and reacting over time. That's the fifth one.
Okay, 5 powers. Mitch, for people who'd like to know more about mind shifting, your book recently published, Mind Shifting, and...
So it's Mind Shifting, Stop Your Brain from Sabotaging Your Happiness and Success is the first book. That's the one that's published. I'm not sure when we're going to drop this, but the second book will be out the end of October, and that'll be Mind Shifting, Conflict, and Collaboration. Okay, and that's, how you deal with people who are trying to oppose you, and actually, so a lot of what you do in your attending message is like you're trying to help people build messages that achieve an effect. Okay, and in your coaching, so in conflict and collaboration, it's like, well, whenever you're talking to people, you're or interacting with people, you're probably trying to have some effect. How do you make sure that effect happens in a way that benefits both people? So that's the conflict and collaboration book. And people can access me or my writing. I have 2 websites. One, mindshiftingwithmitch.com, which is my main website that explains the different things that I do. And then mindshiftingwithmitch.blog is my newsletter. And so you can see writings on the different subjects, and you can sign up if you want to receive email notifications.
And you can find those links in the description below. Mitch, you have a bold ambition. What is that?
Well, so my mission is that if a critical mass of people understood how to be resourceful, resilient, and collaborative, first of all, they would live better lives. They'd be happier, they'd be more productive. But a critical mass will start moving us to really solve all these issues that we face where we're just very divisive and we're conflicting over them. So arbitrarily, I picked the number 5 million. We have 8 billion people on the planet. If we had 5 million people who were all resourceful, resilient, and collaborative, we would be able to band together and start moving us in the directions some directions that we need to go. And there's not just one. There's many different things that we could try, but we'd actually be making progress rather than stalemating the way we are now. That's my mission, 5 million people. And anybody who can help that, one way, I think these techniques benefit anybody. They can benefit you as you're trying to communicate. They can benefit you as you're trying to run a business. A lot of the people who read it find it really helps with their families, with, their spouses, their children, their parents. But the way I'm attacking it also is in my courses, I'm trying to teach teachers. And so any way that I could reach more teachers, if anybody has any ideas or anybody can introduce me to people who allow me to introduce courses to more teachers, that would be very helpful.
Mitch, as we prepare to wrap up, imagine you're talking with a team leader and they're looking for ways to use these ideas within their team. Mm-hmm. If you could offer them 1, 2, or 3 pieces of advice to this team leader to help them nurture this type of team thinking and working together, what might that be?
Well, to me, one way is to read the book, but I don't think you learn this from reading the book. Actually, I wrote the book for a number of purposes, but what I found is that when people use the book with groups of people and you spend time discussing the information in the book, then you're building a vocabulary of people so that when you see a person acting or talking in a certain way, you can say, oh, do you think that might be a limbic reaction? Or Are you using the techniques in order to connect with this person? Or are you just trying to convince them with facts when they're in a limbic mode and they're not open to facts? So I would say using the book as a discussion with your team would be a great way to institute this within an organization or within a team. If, there's other people who were trying to get similar messages out, I think if you wanted to take one message, and that message from me would be that your brain is a lot more powerful and can accomplish a lot more than you think it can, if you can quiet your survival brain. So the number one thing is to be able to recognize when you're in survival mode. And then the number two thing is to be able to have the techniques to be able to move from survival brain into sage or resourceful brain.
Powerful advice.
How would you use that, by the way? Because because you're talking to people about getting their message across. Now I'm going to turn it back to you, George. How would you use that with people that you're advising?
My thought on that, Mitch, is that I'm with you on the influence that our survival brain can have on our performance, on our thinking, on our actions. And my advice would be that, as you're saying, to become aware of the narratives that we're creating within our mind to explain what we don't understand or haven't taken the time to understand, that's getting in the way of us sending a clear intended message. Because I've noticed that when we don't understand something or when something happens, the first thing we're trying to do is to form a narrative so that we can tell ourselves, oh, I understand this. I got this. And you're totally wrong. You're messed up.
Yep.
And
that's just our brains because we're human.
Yep. And you know what? It's easier to notice when that happens in other people, harder to see it in ourselves.
Right. I can see it happening in my wife all the time. The fact that it happens to me too, I may not notice that, but right.
Which is why, as you pointed out, there are times when it is so helpful to have another person who you trust and respect, who can point out, even if they're repeating your own words back to you, and suddenly you go, oh, yeah, he's got me there.
It's funny as you're saying that, because somebody asked me recently, like, well, you talk about self-awareness. When did you become self-aware that you're very often wrong? And my answer was, well, I've been married for 40 years. And right after I got married, I didn't need to tell myself because I had somebody telling me all the
time. that can be such a powerful reminder that we aren't always right, even when we think we are. Yeah. My guest today is Mitch Weisburgh, reminding you to get a hold on that survival brain and tap into your resourcefulness, resilience, and collaboration.
If you like what you heard, tell your friends and post your 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, because that helps more listeners find us. Come back every week for more practical insights to help you deliver your intended message. I'm your host, George Torok.